Okay, following up on the last video and going forward towards the anti-bullshit man video, good video, about this whole subject of, objectivity and subjectivity, and how come philosophically people can't acknowledge simple truths like, oh yeah, suffering sucks. No, they can't acknowledge that. It's not a truth. Harm, hurt, destructive, all these words mean nothing. They're all subjective mush. And it is rather bizarre. I think he's probably right about the motivation. It's kind of like Matt, you just gotta, hey, I don't like the truth, so I'm just going to invent some bullshit words and some mush just to fog it all up, so I don't have to look at the truth, so I can pretend the truth is something else, because that's what we need. We all need a fairy tale. We need to pretend. We need a happily ever after. And so we'll just make one up, because that's the only way we can excuse the bullshit we're addicted to. And addiction's a big part of this whole thing, because addiction is the only part that is what really makes it all make sense. I mean, that's why it only makes sense to people, because they're addicted to it. Heroin makes sense to people who are addicted to it. Alcohol makes sense to people who are addicted to it. It's not that complex. But an objective observer is going to say, hey, that's not worth your trouble. That's a waste of your time, fella. But anyway. So I guess I'll just make this easy on you. I'll do the babbling later, and I'll just give you two pointed questions. If you're going to comment, then you have to answer the fucking questions. Well, the darned questions. Damn, that word always gets me in trouble. Anyway, and if you don't, then maybe I'll just delete your comment or something, because, I'm asking you got to answer the questions. All right, so let's just say you're in the nowhere place, where you are before you come here, and you don't. You have nothing. You're neither in a bad mood, not in a good mood. You're not nothing. You feel nothing. You want nothing, but you're motivated by nothing. Anyway, but you're still reasonable. All right, and somebody puts it to you. You get to do the live somebody else's life thing. You get to pick a life or whatever. It'll be imposed on you. So let's just take that as the context. So the first part of the question would be what percentage of the human lives now living on planet Earth, the 7 billion people, what percentage of those lives would you voluntarily live? So, you have to include everybody, people. You have to include all the 6-year-old kids who are going to get cancer, and you have to include the exploited people working in horrible conditions, and the 5,000 guys who are going to die in a coal mine in China, and all the bad stuff and all the good stuff, and personalities you don't like, personalities you do like, races you like, races you don't like. So just what percentage of the existing human beings would you be willing to live their life? I mean, voluntarily say, yes, I'll go do that. So that's the first question. And then the second question is even tougher, because then let's extend it to the, say, 20,000 years of human history. The last 20,000 years. What percentage of those human beings would you want to live their life? So you got to include all the guys who died of plague and the cholera, and all the women who died in childbirth, and all the presidents who got shot, and then the doctor stuck big rods in their fucking brains to try to poke bullets out, and all the kinds of presidential wives who had to have mastectomies without anesthesia, all kinds of goddamn shit going on. So you got to include all of that crap. So what percentage of the human race life? Slaves and cargo ship boats and all the horrors, and all the good, which would be, I guess, some rich guy sitting in France smoking a peep. So anyway, I'm just curious what the percentages numbers we come up with are. So you just got to put one, number one, and then the percentage. Oh shit. And then number two, and then that percentage. That's all. Not much work to do. And if you comment without doing that, then I'll just fucking delete your comment. Something like that anyway. I'll poop on it in some way. Smear poop on it. But anyway. Alright, so getting on to the subject. This whole idea that we have to come up with some sort of logic to defend the foundations of reality. Like the idea that matter is material, or something. That's what it comes down to. And when you have to sort of argue that suffering is a bad thing, generally speaking, we're not talking about desire, we're not talking about frustration, we're talking about suffering in the classical sense of the word. I mean, even in the rational sense of the word, get real. How many people use the word suffering to describe, not having a cupcake when they want it? I mean, that's not what we're talking about here. But obviously, people always want to bend the conversation to something they can fuck with, and so they'll even fuck with the word suffering. So if you want to change the word to misery or, harsh deprivation or pain or anguish, agony. Agony is a good word. We could use that. We could use ecstasy for the good and agony for the bad. So people in agony, use that instead of suffering. I mean, you have to explain why agony is a bad thing. I don't, like I said, it's a negative. What needs to be explained? We experience it. We have personal knowledge of it through that experience. We know exactly what it is. We're consciously aware of it. We're capable of understanding it through that awareness. I mean, if we didn't have that awareness, it'd be really hard to explain this thing. But it's through that awareness we gain this great advantage in knowledge, and so our intelligence can do something with that, and it can say, hey, I know what a bad feeling is. Yeah, I know that. I've been there. I've done that. And obviously not all of us have really experienced it. Like I said, I've made this point before, but I didn't really know what pain was until I was about 30 years old. I mean, I experienced some pain, but I didn't really know what it was, So, I mean, things do wake you up, and you say, oh, this is the whole next level I've heard about. But anyway, that's a whole nother issue of what we feel relative to each other and how our perspective might be limited by our own personal advantages or disadvantages. But that's all important stuff, because it does, but again, it's about separating this psychology crap from philosophy. They're two different things. One is supposed to be built entirely out of reason, and the other one we know is built out of complete bullshit. Okay, I mean, it's built out of subjective conditioned desires and preferences. It's built out of this ego-y thing, this self-interested beast thing that has been programmed by nature, okay, to be motivated. Okay, it's been motivated. The motivation, it's born with the motivation, to do things that are going to tend in the long run to perpetuate that version of reproducing machine. It's the variety it is, and that's the game. That's how natural selection works. We are created to be desirous, and life ends up being one of the things we desire, because we use a little tiny bit of our brain to figure out that, oh yeah, I can't have sex tomorrow if I'm not alive tomorrow, so I've got to live to have sex tomorrow. So we're able to do a little bit of reasoning to change the equation a little. But we know, we see the other animals caught up in the trap. I mean, they don't have the perspective we have, but we can see they have the desires we have. So I mean, they're not worried about surviving. They're living day to day based on feelings. All right, they have no conception of death and mortality. They just have a conception of desire. So anyway, so we know what we are. We know we got that animal in us, but we have this whole capacity to do this rationality thing, and it can be quite separate. We can add 2 plus 2 without allowing our emotions to get involved, and we can do logical equations just as easily without emoting on every single syllable. Yes, we're fundamentally incapable of there not being some spillage. Emotions are part of how reasoning works, but the spillage can be controlled. The taint can be controlled. The philosophy can be, the logic can be the primary directive. It can own the judgment. And it's just a matter of being disciplined enough, or being strict enough. And most people aren't going to do that because their ego is going to sneak in there, but they won't concede their ego is shit. They won't concede the animal, and so then they'll keep trying to rationalize the animal and excuse the animal, and they want to build a philosophy that validates the animal, and that validates them even, their selfish lifestyle, their selfish perspective. They don't want the burdens of rationality, because rationality is going to say some pretty obvious things, like that guy over there is just as important as you are. What he feels is just as magnificent and powerful and all that crap. And his welfare is just as valuable as your welfare. And you really can't excuse this selfishness crap, because the reality is that if there's if he can be made happy more economically than you, then he's a better person to be investing in. So anyway, damn, really ran out of time. Damn, I didn't even rag on women much. I mean, they have them damn babies. Eesh. On purpose.